They say curiosity is a dangerous thing, but some curiosities are deadly. On a quiet street, hidden behind the shadows of an old market, a man finds a mirror unlike any other, black as night, carved with strange symbols, and whispering secrets no human should hear. He doesn't know it yet, but behind its glass, 13 demons wait, patient, hungry, watching. And once he dares to look, the edge begins to crack. This is the story of what happens when curiosity meets terror, and when the first scratch opens the door to a nightmare you can never escape. The rain had been falling since evening. Cold, steady, endless. Daniel pulled his coat tighter as he walked through the narrow street behind the old market. Most of the shops had already closed, their metal doors pulled down like silent guards against the night. But one shop was still open, a small antique store he had never noticed before. The wooden sign above the door creaked softly in the wind, swinging back and forth. The faded letters read, "Obsidian Relics." Daniel hesitated. Something about the place felt strange, like the air around it was heavier. But curiosity pushed him forward. He opened the door. A small bell rang. Inside, the shop smelled of dust, old wood, and something else, something metallic. The room was filled with strange objects. Ancient clocks that no longer moved. Cracked porcelain dolls with empty eyes. Old books bound in dark leather. And mirrors. Mirrors of every size and shape hung on the walls. Tall mirrors. Round mirrors. Broken mirrors. Daniel slowly walked between them, noticing that many of them were covered with dark cloth, as if someone didn't want them to be seen. Then he noticed one mirror standing in the far corner. It was tall, framed in black wood carved with strange symbols. Unlike the others, it was not covered. Daniel stepped closer. The surface of the mirror was darker than normal glass. It almost looked like black water frozen in place. His reflection stared back at him, but something about it felt wrong. For a brief moment, Daniel thought his reflection moved slightly slower than he did. He blinked. Everything looked normal again. Beautiful piece, isn't it? The voice came from behind him. Daniel turned suddenly. An old man stood near the counter, thin and pale, his eyes sunken deep into his face. Daniel hadn't heard him walk in. "Yes," Daniel said nervously. "It's unusual." The old man slowly walked toward the mirror. "Most people don't notice it," he said quietly. "But some people," he continued, staring at Daniel, "are noticed by it." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" The old man ignored the question. Instead, he leaned close to the mirror and gently tapped the frame. "Old object," he whispered. "Very old." Daniel looked closer at the frame. Strange symbols had been carved all around it. They looked ancient, almost like something from a forgotten language. "How much is it?" Daniel asked. The old man smiled slowly. "Cheap," he said. "Too cheap for something like this." Daniel laughed. "Then why sell it?" The old man's smile disappeared. "Because it does not belong in this world anymore." Silence filled the room. For a moment, Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. But he shook the feeling away. He needed a mirror for his apartment anyway. "I'll take it," he said. The old man stared at him for a long time. Then he nodded. As Daniel carried the mirror toward the door, the old man spoke again. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Just remember one thing." Daniel stopped. "What?" The old man's eyes looked darker now. "Never look into it after midnight." Daniel laughed again. "Why?" The old man slowly looked at the mirror, and for a moment, something scratched softly from the other side of the glass. The old man whispered, "Because that is when they wake up." Daniel pretended not to hear. He left the shop with the mirror under his arm. Behind him, the bell rang as the door closed. Inside the shop, the old man stared at the empty doorway. Then he turned toward the other mirrors hanging on the walls. One by one, they all began to tremble. And somewhere deep inside the mirror Daniel had taken, something scratched. Slowly, patiently, waiting. Daniel reached his apartment a little after 10 p.m. The rain had stopped, but the night still felt heavy and quiet. He carried the tall mirror carefully up the stairs and placed it in the corner of his small living room, leaning it against the wall opposite his couch. The black wooden frame looked even stranger under the yellow light of his apartment bulb. The carved symbols around the frame seemed deeper now, like small wounds cut into the wood. Daniel wiped some dust from the glass and stepped back to look at it. His reflection stared back at him clearly. Nothing strange, just a mirror. He shook his head and laughed softly. The old man in the shop had probably only wanted to scare him. "Never look into it after midnight," Daniel muttered mockingly. "Yeah, right." He made himself a late dinner, ate while scrolling through his phone, and watched a random movie to pass the time. But every few minutes his eyes moved toward the mirror. Something about it pulled his attention like a quiet magnet. It stood there silently in the corner of the room, reflecting the dim apartment and Daniel's slow movements. At one point he could have sworn the reflection of the room looked slightly darker than the actual room. He stood up and walked closer. The mirror looked normal again. By 11:45 p.m., Daniel turned off the television. The apartment became quiet. Too quiet. Only the distant sound of cars outside and the slow ticking of his wall clock remained. He stretched and walked past the mirror toward his bedroom, but as he passed it, he felt something strange, the coldest breeze brushing the back of his neck. He turned quickly. Nothing. The window was closed. The mirror simply reflected him standing there. "Just tired," he said to himself. He went into the bedroom but left the door open. The mirror was still visible from his bed. He lay down and tried to sleep, but sleep didn't come easily. The room felt strange. His eyes kept drifting toward the mirror across the living room. For a moment he thought he saw movement inside it, like a shadow shifting behind the glass, but when he focused, it disappeared. Then the clock struck midnight. 12 a.m. The room became strangely colder. Daniel pulled the blanket over himself. His eyes slowly began to close. Then it happened. A small sound. Very light. So faint he almost thought he imagined it. Daniel's eyes opened again. He stared into the dark living room. Nothing moved. He waited. Silence. He exhaled slowly and turned his body away from the mirror. Then the sound came again. This time it was clearer. Daniel sat up immediately. The sound came from the living room, from the direction of the mirror. His heart began to beat faster. He listened carefully. The apartment was silent again. No cars. No wind. No neighbors talking. He slowly stood from the bed and walked toward the living room. The floor felt cold under his feet. As he stepped into the room, the mirror reflected him approaching. Everything looked normal. Daniel leaned closer. His reflection leaned closer too. "See? Nothing," he whispered. He turned away. Then behind him, scratch. Daniel froze. The sound had come from the mirror, not outside it, inside. Slowly, very slowly, he turned back. The mirror showed his frightened reflection staring back at him. And then he saw it. 3 thin lines slowly appearing on the surface of the glass. But not on the outside. They were forming inside the mirror, like something invisible was dragging sharp claws across the other side of the glass. Daniel stepped back. The scratching stopped. The lines remained. 3 long claw marks. Daniel's breathing became uneven. That's impossible," he whispered. He leaned closer again, studying the marks. They looked deep, almost like something had tried to carve through the glass from the other side. Suddenly the mirror fogged. Daniel blinked. A thin layer of mist slowly spread across the inside of the mirror's surface. But the room was not cold enough for that. And then something worse happened. In the fogged glass, Daniel saw his reflection again. But it was wrong. His reflection was smiling. Daniel was not. The smile on the reflection slowly faded as if realizing it had been caught. The mirror cleared again, returning to normal. Daniel jumped backward, nearly knocking over the table behind him. "Well, I didn't see that," he muttered. He grabbed a cloth and wiped the mirror's surface violently. The claw marks remained. No matter how much he rubbed, the glass suddenly vibrated lightly. Daniel dropped the cloth. The sound was louder now. Slow, deliberate. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Like something patiently testing the barrier between 2 worlds. Daniel leaned closer without realizing it, his curiosity slowly overpowering his fear. "Hello," he said quietly. Silence answered him. Then, deep inside the mirror, something moved. Not a reflection, not a shadow. Something darker, something tall, something standing far behind the surface of the glass where no room existed. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. The shape slowly faded back into darkness. The scratching stopped again. The mirror became perfectly still. Daniel stood there breathing heavily for several seconds before stepping away. "This thing is going back tomorrow," he whispered. He turned off the living room light and rushed back to the bedroom, closing the door behind him. But he didn't know something important. When he turned off the light, the mirror did not go dark. Inside the glass, faint shapes slowly gathered near the claw marks. And from the other side of the mirror, 13 unseen fingers gently pressed against the glass, waiting, patiently, for Daniel to look again tomorrow night. Daniel barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the image of the claw marks inside the mirror returned to his mind. 3 deep scratches that could not be wiped away. By morning, exhaustion had replaced his fear. Sunlight filled the apartment and the room looked normal again. Daniel walked slowly to the living room. The mirror stood exactly where he had left it. The scratches were still there. 3 long marks carved inside the glass. Daniel touched the surface carefully. The outside was perfectly smooth. Whatever had made those marks had done it from the other side. He swallowed and stepped back. "Oh, that's enough," he said quietly. He decided he would return the mirror later that day. But first he needed coffee. He left the apartment for a while, trying to clear his head. Throughout the day, he convinced himself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe the mirror had been damaged before he bought it. Maybe the lighting last night had played tricks on his mind. But as evening approached, an uncomfortable thought kept returning. What if it wasn't his imagination? By nightfall, Daniel was back in his apartment. The mirror remained in the corner, silent and still. He tried to ignore it. He cooked dinner, watched television, and forced himself not to look at it. Yet every few minutes his eyes drifted toward it. The claw marks were clearly visible. 3 thin scars inside the glass. 11:40 p.m. Daniel checked the time inside. "I'm overthinking this," he muttered. He walked to the mirror and examined it again. Nothing unusual happened. No scratching. No fog. Just his reflection. He turned away and went to sit on the couch. 11:58 p.m. The room became strangely quiet again. The television suddenly lost signal, the screen filling with static. Daniel frowned and grabbed the remote, but the television shut off completely. Then the wall clock ticked. Midnight, 12 a.m. The temperature in the apartment dropped. Daniel felt it immediately. The same unnatural cold from the previous night crept across the room. "Not again," he whispered. He stood slowly. For a moment nothing happened. Then the mirror fogged again. Not slowly this time. The entire surface clouded over instantly, as if someone had breathed heavily onto the glass from the other side. Daniel's heart started racing. The fog began to move. At first it looked random, like swirling mist trapped behind the mirror. But then it started forming a shape that looked disturbingly like a face. Daniel stepped closer despite the fear growing inside him. The fog shifted again. 2 hollow shapes formed where eyes should be. A long shadow appeared where a mouth should be. Something was pressing against the inside of the glass. The fog cleared slightly. Daniel's reflection was still there, but now something stood behind it. Something tall. Something thin. Its head tilted slowly to the side. Daniel froze. The thing behind his reflection did not belong in his apartment. It was too tall, too distorted. Its arms looked unnaturally long, hanging beside its body like black branches. Its face remained hidden in the shadow behind Daniel's reflection. "Who's there?" Daniel whispered. The figure did not answer. Instead it moved closer. The glass bulged slightly outward. Then Daniel heard the whisper. A voice so faint it barely existed. Yet it sounded directly inside his head. "You looked." Daniel's breathing stopped. The voice came again. Almost amused. "You heard us scratching?" Daniel stepped back. "No," he said under his breath. "No, this isn't real." The shape behind his reflection moved again. slowly lifting one long arm. Its fingers were thin, too thin, and far too long. The claws touched the inside of the glass exactly where the 3 scratches had appeared the night before. Daniel watched in horror as the claws slowly dragged downward. Scratch. Another mark appeared beside the first 3. The sound echoed through the silent apartment. The fog faded slightly and the face finally became visible. Daniel instantly wished it hadn't. The creature's skin was gray and stretched tight across its skull. Its eyes were completely black, like empty holes filled with darkness. Its mouth opened slowly, revealing rows of thin needle-like teeth. But the most disturbing thing was its smile. It was smiling directly at Daniel. "Open to the edge," the demon whispered. Daniel stumbled backward, knocking into the couch. The creature pressed its face closer to the glass. Its black eyes stared straight through Daniel as if studying him. Then it said something that froze his blood. "There are 13 of us." Daniel shook his head violently. No. The demon lifted one claw again. It slowly tapped the glass. Twice. 3 times. Behind it, deeper inside the mirror, more shapes began to move. Faint silhouettes shifting in the darkness. Daniel saw them for only a moment before the mirror suddenly cleared. Everything vanished. The fog disappeared. The demon was gone. The mirror returned to normal. Only the scratches remained. For claw marks now. Daniel stood there shaking. For a long time he didn't move. Then, from somewhere deep inside the mirror, he heard 12 other voices whisper at once. "Soon." And the scratching slowly began again. Daniel did not sleep that night. After the face vanished from the mirror, he dragged a chair across the living room and sat there staring at the glass until morning. The scratches were still there, 4 deep claw marks inside the mirror. The surface remained smooth when he touched it. Nothing had changed except the marks. But Daniel knew what he had seen. That thing behind his reflection had spoken. And it had said something that would not leave his mind. "There are 13 of us." By sunrise, the apartment looked harmless again. Sunlight poured through the window and washed over the mirror, making it appear like an ordinary antique piece. Daniel almost wanted to believe everything from the night before had been a nightmare. But when he leaned closer, the 4 scratches were still there, long and thin like wounds in the glass. "No, this thing is not staying here," he muttered. He grabbed a blanket and covered the mirror completely. For a moment the room felt lighter, like a pressure had been lifted. Daniel exhaled slowly. But curiosity had already taken root in his mind. The demon had said something else. "You open the edge." What did that mean? He walked behind the mirror to examine the back of the frame. The wood was darker there, almost black, and the strange carvings continued around the edges. He had noticed the symbols before in the antique shop, but now he looked closer. They were not random decorations. They were arranged in patterns, repeating in circles around the frame like a language. At the center of the back panel was a larger symbol. A circle with 13 thin lines stretching outward like broken rays. Daniel frowned. "What is this?" He ran his fingers over the carving. The grooves were deep, like they had been cut with careful precision. But something else caught his attention. The wood around the symbol was slightly loose. Daniel pressed on it. The panel shifted. He pulled harder and the small wooden plate slid open, revealing a narrow hidden space inside the frame. Daniel stepped back in surprise. Inside the hollow space was a folded piece of old paper. The paper looked ancient, yellowed with age and covered in dust. Daniel hesitated for a moment before carefully removing it. The paper crackled softly as he unfolded it. Written across the page were several symbols identical to the ones carved on the mirror. Below them was a paragraph written in old ink. Daniel read it slowly. "To the keeper of the mirror, this object was not made for reflection. It was made for imprisonment. 13 entities once walked between the worlds of shadow and flesh. They fed on fear and entered our world through reflective surfaces. Mirrors, still water, polished stone. Anything that could show a reflection became a door." Daniel's stomach tightened. He kept reading. The order sealed them within the edge, a thin layer between reflection and reality. The mirror was created as their prison. The 13 symbols carved around the frame bind them to the glass. But the prison weakens when a mortal repeatedly gazes into the mirror after midnight. Curiosity is the key that unlocks the barrier. Daniel's heartbeat grew louder. He remembered the nights he had stood in front of the mirror. He counted quickly in his mind. First night in the shop, then last night. Tonight would be the third. He continued reading. When the boundary weakens, the demons scratch from the other side. Each scratch marks the breaking of the seal. When 13 scratches appear, the barrier will collapse and the demons will cross into the world of flesh again. Daniel slowly looked toward the covered mirror. For scratches. He swallowed. For already. His eyes moved back to the page. The last lines were written in darker ink, as if someone had pressed the pen harder out of fear. If the scratching begins, do not answer their whispers. Do not look into the mirror after midnight. Do not let them learn your face. If the 13th mark appears, the prison becomes a doorway. And once they step through, the edge will never close again. Daniel lowered the paper slowly. The room suddenly felt colder. For a long moment he stared at the blanket covering the mirror. Everything inside him told him to destroy it immediately. But something else whispered in his mind. What if the note was wrong? What if he could prove this was all superstition? Daniel folded the paper and placed it on the table. He turned toward the mirror and stared at the blanket covering it. The shape of the tall frame stood there silently like a waiting shadow. Then a sound came from beneath the cloth. Slow. Daniel froze. Another scratch followed. Scratch, scratch. He felt the cold spread through the room again. Then a whisper came from the covered mirror. Not one voice this time. Several. Low and patient. For Daniel's hands began to tremble. The whisper came again, clearer this time. 9 more to go. And beneath the blanket, something pressed gently against the inside of the glass. Daniel did not touch the mirror for the rest of the day. The paper he found inside the frame lay open on the table. He had read it more than 10 times, hoping the meaning would somehow change. It never did. The message was clear. The mirror was a prison, and every scratch weakened it. 4 marks already existed. 9 more and the barrier would break. Yet the words that disturbed him most were not about the scratches. It was the warning. Do not let them learn your face. Daniel remembered how the first demon had watched him through the glass, studying him, memorizing him. Evening came slowly. The sky darkened and the apartment lights flickered on. Daniel avoided the mirror completely. The blanket still covered it, hiding the black frame and the cursed glass beneath. For a while the apartment remained quiet. But as night grew deeper, the silence changed. It felt heavy again. The same unnatural cold crept slowly through the room. Daniel checked the time. 11:54 p.m. His stomach tightened. No, not tonight, he muttered. He walked to the mirror and grabbed the blanket. For a moment he thought about leaving it covered forever. Maybe that would stop whatever was inside. Then the whisper came. Very faint. Daniel? He froze. His name. Something inside the mirror had spoken his name. Daniel's breathing became uneven. Slowly, he pulled the blanket away. The mirror was clear. The 4 scratches were still there. Nothing else moved. Daniel stared at it carefully. I know what you are, he said quietly. You're trapped. The glass remained silent. Daniel stepped closer. You can't come out. His reflection stared back at him. For a moment he felt relieved. Then the clock struck midnight. 12 a.m. The mirror instantly fogged over. The temperature in the apartment dropped so suddenly Daniel could see his breath. The scratches inside the mirror began to vibrate. Then the first demon appeared again. Its gray face slowly pushed through the mist behind Daniel's reflection. The same hollow black eyes stared at him. The same long claws dragged slowly across the inside of the glass. The demon smiled. You returned. Daniel forced himself not to step back. You're not real, he said, though his voice trembled. The demon tilted its head. Reality is a thin thing. Behind the first demon, something moved in the darkness. Another shape, then another. Daniel's heart began pounding harder. The first demon slowly stepped aside. and two more figures emerged from the black space behind it. The second demon was tall and twisted, its body bent in unnatural angles, as if its bones had been broken and reset many times. Its arms dragged along the ground behind it like long shadows. Its face had no eyes at all, only a wide mouth stretching across its skull. The third demon was smaller but far more disturbing. Its head hung loosely to one side while its body remained perfectly still. Its skin looked pale and wet, as if it had been pulled from deep water. Thin strands of dark hair covered its face, hiding its eyes completely. Daniel staggered back. "You said 13, he whispered. The first demon nodded slowly. "And now you see 3. The second demon moved closer to the glass. Its long arm lifted slowly. The claws were sharper than the first demon's. They scraped downward across the inside of the mirror. Scratch. A fifth mark appeared beside the others. Daniel felt his stomach twist. The third demon suddenly lifted its head. The hair covering its face parted slightly. 2 pale glowing eyes stared directly at Daniel. Then it spoke. Its voice sounded wet and hollow. "You watch, we learn." Daniel shook his head. "No." But the third demon continued. "You move, we remember." The second demon dragged its claw again. Scratch. A 6th mark appeared. The demons behind the glass began to whisper together, low voices echoing in the darkness. Daniel realized with growing horror what they meant. They were studying him, learning how humans moved, learning how humans spoke. The first demon leaned closer to the glass. Its face nearly touched the surface. "Soon, the edge will break." Daniel shouted, "No." He grabbed the chair and slammed it against the mirror. The glass shook violently. The demons inside stepped back instantly, but the mirror did not break. Not even a crack. The first demon smiled wider. "This prison cannot be broken from your side." Daniel stood there breathing heavily. 6 scratches now scarred the glass. Halfway, behind the first 3 demons, more shapes began shifting in the darkness. Faint outlines moving deeper inside the mirror. Watching. Waiting. The third demon whispered one last time. 7 nights remain. The fog suddenly vanished. The mirror returned to normal again. The demons were gone. Only the scratches remained. 6 thin claw marks carved into the glass. But Daniel didn't notice something happening behind him. His reflection inside the mirror did not disappear when he turned away. It stayed there, watching, and slowly, it began to smile. Daniel did not turn around immediately. He felt it before he saw it, that strange pressure in the room, like someone standing behind him without making a sound. Slowly, he turned back toward the mirror. His reflection was normal again. No smile, no demons, just the 6 claw marks inside the glass. Daniel exhaled heavily and ran both hands through his hair. His mind was racing. The demons were learning him. They had said it clearly, "You watch, we learn." That meant every time he looked into the mirror, he was helping them. He looked at the clock. 12:17 a.m. The demons had vanished again, just like the previous night. But the scratches remained. 6 marks. Halfway to 13. Daniel grabbed the old paper from the table again and reread the warning. The ink seemed darker now under the weak apartment light. When 13 scratches appear, the barrier will collapse. He stared at the mirror again. 6 scratches meant the prison was already weakening. But something about the demon's words from earlier disturbed him even more. 7 nights remain. Why 7? Daniel thought carefully. Then it hit him. The paper had said something else. The prison weakened when someone looked into the mirror repeatedly after midnight. Daniel began counting. The first time he had looked was at the antique shop when he noticed the strange reflection. Then the first night in his apartment. Then the second night when the first demon appeared. Tonight was the 3rd night. 3 nights. 7 remaining. 10 nights in total. The realization made his stomach drop. 10 nights, he whispered. That meant the mirror had a cycle. Each night he looked into it after midnight, the demons came closer to breaking the barrier. The scratches were not random. They were progress. The demons were counting. Daniel grabbed the blanket again and threw it over the mirror violently. "No more," he said. The room fell silent. For a moment he felt relief again. But the silence did not last long. A slow tapping sound came from beneath the blanket. Daniel froze. Something was touching the glass again. Then the whispers began. This time there were more voices. Hungry. 6. Daniel backed away from the mirror. The voices continued. 7, 9. They were counting ahead. Daniel shouted, "Stop." The whispering stopped instantly. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then one voice spoke clearly from beneath the cloth. It was the first demon. "You cannot hide from the count." Daniel's hands trembled. "I won't look at the mirror again," he said. Silence followed. Then a different voice answered him. This one sounded deeper, older. "Curiosity is stronger than fear." The blanket slowly shifted. Something pressed against the inside of the glass. The shape of a hand appeared beneath the cloth, long fingers stretching outward. Then another hand, and another. Daniel watched in horror as multiple shapes pushed against the mirror from the other side. The cloth stretched outward as the glass bulged slightly. The demons were gathering. The first demon's voice returned. "You have already begun the curse." Daniel shook his head. "No." But the demon continued. "The curse of 13. Daniel's breathing became shallow. "What does that mean?" he whispered. The demon answered slowly. 13 scratches, 13 gates, 13 steps across the edge. The cloth suddenly ripped slightly where one claw pressed too hard. A thin tear opened. Through the tear Daniel could see the mirror's surface. And inside it, more faces, more demons. Not just 3 anymore. At least 6 figures stood behind the glass now. Watching, waiting. The first demon spoke again. "Each scratch weakens the prison." The deeper voice spoke again. "When the 13th mark appears." Another claw dragged slowly across the inside of the mirror. Scratch. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. The 7th mark appeared. The voices whispered together. "The edge will open." The cloth settled again. The hands disappeared. The mirror returned to silence. Daniel stood frozen across the room. 7 scratches now scarred the glass. 6 more to go. But somewhere deep inside the mirror, something far larger than the others slowly opened its eyes. Daniel barely slept that night. Every shadow in his apartment seemed alive, and every sound made him jump. He stayed on the couch, blanket draped over his shoulders, staring at the covered mirror. The paper from the frame lay open on the table. He didn't dare read it again. He already knew the warning. 13 scratches, 13 steps, 13 gates. The first 7 had been made. 6 remained. And tonight felt different. He could feel it. 11:58 p.m. The apartment went completely silent. Not a car outside. Not a distant voice. Only the tick of the wall clock. Daniel's breath came in short, shallow gasps. He stared at the covered mirror. The air felt heavier, pressing down on him. Then, suddenly, the blanket shifted slightly. Daniel froze. Something was moving beneath it. He wanted to run. He couldn't. Curiosity, fear, and horror locked him in place. The blanket slowly rose as if something beneath it was pushing. The mirror fogged instantly, covering the entire surface in a thick, dark mist. From the mist, shapes began to emerge. Shadows at first, then tall, twisted figures. Daniel counted quickly in his mind. 1, 2, 3. There were more than 3 now. The first demon stepped forward. Its black eyes stared at him. Its long claws scraped the inside of the glass. Scratch. A mark appeared. The second demon joined. Its face stretched in impossible angles. Scratch. The third moved closer, its glowing eyes fixed on Daniel. Scratch. The fog swirled violently. Then, from the deeper darkness, 2 more shapes pushed forward. Daniel realized with horror that the remaining demons had begun to appear, one after another. By midnight, the mirror was alive with movement. The scratches inside the glass vibrated, glowing faintly as if absorbing the room's darkness. Daniel tried to step back, but his feet felt frozen. The first demon spoke, its voice echoing in his mind. The barrier weakens, the edge opens. The second demon hissed in agreement. You cannot stop what you began. The temperature dropped further. His breath froze in the air. The mirror's surface began to ripple like water. Daniel's reflection remained, but behind it, 13 forms pressed against the glass. They were tall, twisted, eyes hollow or glowing, faces twisted in silent screams. Their claws dragged slowly across the inside of the mirror. Fresh. Each mark deepened. The largest shape moved to the center. Its body seemed impossible, limbs bending at unnatural angles. Its face was obscured by shadows, but Daniel felt its gaze directly in his mind. The whispers began, low and urgent. "We will cross. You have opened the edge." Suddenly, the mirror bulged outward. The glass stretched like liquid under the pressure of unseen hands. Daniel screamed and stumbled backward. The demons' faces pressed closer. One of them extended a claw halfway through the glass. Daniel could see the fine black hairs on its hand, the thin, needle-like nails scraping toward him. His chest tightened. The edge was breaking. Then a sudden silence. The fog cleared. The mirror looked normal, smooth, quiet, but the scratches remained, 7 of them now deep and black. Daniel's knees gave out. He sank to the floor, trembling. Somewhere deep inside the glass, the largest of the demons blinked. One dark eye opened fully, watching him. And somewhere far behind it, the remaining figures waited. Patiently, hungry, waiting for the 13th scratch. Daniel knew he had survived the opening, but only barely. The mirror had shown him what it could do, and the demons had learned. They were closer, stronger, and he was running out of nights. Daniel barely slept that night. His body ached from tension, but his mind refused to rest. The mirror sat in the corner of the living room, covered with a blanket, yet he could feel it pulsing beneath the fabric like a heartbeat. 7 scratches marred the glass. 6 more to go. 6 nights remaining. Every instinct screamed at him to leave it alone, but curiosity and dread had him frozen in place. 11:59 p.m. The apartment went completely silent. Not a sound outside, not a hum of electricity, nothing but Daniel's own ragged breathing. The clock ticked once, twice, 12 strikes. Midnight. The blanket shifted violently. Daniel's eyes widened. The glass fogged instantly, black mist curling across its surface. From the mist, shadows began to move. The first 3 demons appeared immediately, dragging their claws across the glass. Fresh. The 8th mark appeared. Then more shadows emerged from deeper inside the mirror, for more. Daniel counted mentally, 9, 10, 11, 12. The claws of the demons scraped deliberately against the inside of the glass. Each scratch was a pulse, a heartbeat of the prison weakening. His stomach churned as he realized the final, 13th mark was imminent. The largest shadow detached itself from the back, slowly moving toward the center of the glass. Its limbs bent at impossible angles. Its face was hidden in darkness, but one eye glowed like molten black glass. Daniel's heart pounded violently. The whisper came directly into his mind, multiple voices overlapping. "You open the edge. We will cross." Daniel stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The first demon leaned forward, its claw halfway through the glass, probing. Scratch. The 13th mark appeared. The mirror shuddered violently. The glass rippled as if it were liquid. The floor beneath Daniel vibrated. A cold wind burst from the mirror, extinguishing the lights. Shadows poured from the black surface, spilling into the apartment. The first demon's face pressed fully against the glass. Its teeth were thin and sharp, glinting in the faint moonlight. Then it stepped through. Daniel screamed as the first clawed arm broke the surface, dragging him toward the mirror. The other 12 shapes followed, each emerging slowly, their black eyes fixed on him. Their whispers filled the room, chanting in a language older than the world itself. The edge had broken. The prison no longer existed. Daniel tried to run, but the shadows moved faster than he could react. The demon's long limbs bent and twisted, wrapping around the room, closing every exit. The largest demon reached for him, its glowing eye locking onto his face. Its voice thundered inside his mind, "Now, "You belong to us." A scream tore from Daniel's throat as the darkness consumed him. The apartment fell silent again. Only the mirror remained, perfectly smooth and unbroken. The 13 scratches remained etched inside the glass, faint but permanent, glowing softly as if alive. Outside, the city slept unaware. And inside the mirror, 13 pairs of black eyes blinked. Waiting. Patiently. Hungrily. The edge had opened. Daniel was never seen again. The police searched his apartment, but there was no trace of him. Only the mirror remained in the corner of the living room, smooth and silent, the 13 scratches faintly etched inside the glass. The apartment felt empty, lifeless, yet Daniel's last terrified scream seemed to echo faintly in the walls. Weeks later, the mirror disappeared from the abandoned apartment. No one saw who took it. Rumors whispered about a man selling antiques at a small market on the edge of town, a man with pale skin and sunken eyes who never spoke unless spoken to. The mirror resurfaced in another shop, perfectly clean and polished, hanging in a corner like any ordinary antique. Its black frame gleamed under the dim light. To anyone passing by, it was just another curiosity to admire until they stared too long. One afternoon, a young woman named Clara entered the shop. She was drawn to the mirror immediately, as if something invisible tugged at her attention. The shopkeeper smiled faintly. "You'll want to be careful with that one," he said. "It's special." Clara laughed nervously. "It's just a mirror." The shopkeeper's eyes darkened. "Some mirrors aren't just mirrors." Clara's reflection stared back at her. Perfectly normal. But when she leaned closer, the faintest scratches appeared in the glass, thin, black lines forming slowly from the inside. She blinked. Then she heard it. A faint scratching behind the glass. Slow, deliberate, curious, hungry. Clara froze. The air around her grew cold. She glanced at the reflection and saw shapes moving in the darkness behind her own eyes. Figures tall, twisted, eyes hollow and black. They were watching her, learning her movements, memorizing her face. The shopkeeper whispered softly, 13 scratches, 13 gates, 13 steps across the edge. Once you watch, once they see you, there is no turning back." The mirror seemed to pulse under her gaze. One by one, faint shadows pressed against the inside of the glass. 13 claws scratched slowly. The edge had been opened once before. Now it waited again. Clara stepped back. She wanted to run, to leave the shop forever, but the mirror had already noticed her. And somewhere, deep inside the glass, 13 pairs of black eyes blinked. Patient, waiting, hungry. The mirror's new owner had been chosen. And the cycle began again.